Chamber. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. I'm looking into possibly opening up my own glue factory, which is not a sentence I thought I would be uttering after last week, but I've been just dismantled on Zed, so I don't know what to do with my
I feel
life.
like you've run your horses straight into the ground.
I don't know what to do anymore.
Des, how are you, buddy?
Good. I am being so unrealistically optimistic about my horses, and but it's funny, I'm clinging on to my win rate, so like it's harder every single time to race them, especially as they go up each class, but I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Fantastic. And we've got an awesome episode lined up today. We have two fantastic guests. So we've got Adam from Zed Gazette and Dr. Ian Brooks, which is, the data scientist. Almost became a meme. I feel like, Adam, people didn't even believe you that he existed. And so I am honored to actually have Ian on the show, Dr. Ian on the show with us today to chat about Zed Run, how you guys have kind of come up with some of your awesome theories, and just to talk some horses, man. It's so exciting. I've been like living in this world for the past couple of weeks, and I'm pretty excited to get to pick your guys' brain. So let's start here. So let's start with Adam, and maybe you could pass on to Ian when you're done. But I do want to know kind of how you two found, one, the game. How did you find Zed Run? And two, how did you find each other?
I found Zed Run just because I've been a crypto guy for so long, and I just keep an eye out for new projects all the time. I was a big Bitcoin fork guy, kind of got out of the space for a bit for the smart contracts, reintroduced myself and found Zed pretty quickly. A lot of fun playing it so far. And then I met Dr. Ian. He's my brother-in-law's best friend from college, right? So
interesting. Okay, so the family trees don't just apply to the horses. We've got a little family tree going on here as well.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on all of it.
So Dr. Ian, did Adam just come to you one day and say, "Hey, I've got this crazy idea. I need you to run all this data on virtual horses"?
Well, I mean, it was the day after Thanksgiving, actually. So it was like college football was on, and I get a call, and he's like, you need to check this out. And like, I've known Adam long enough to know that in the crypto space, he actually does, not only is he an expert, but he's been into it for a long time, that if he's really inside about something, that it's worth looking into. I checked out my first, I got on the website, looked around, then I watched the first 3D race, and I honestly was kind of hooked at that point. I was like, oh, yeah, I could see people watching this for 50 years in virtual reality and augmented reality too. And I could see this replacing real horse racing, especially when you think about the generation of people that own real horses today and the people that would want to own them in digital space in the future. So I immediately was hooked, and then I got into racing too much for probably the first 6 weeks. I mean, just way too much racing, way too many hours a day. Doing that's a problem. So yeah.
You had
a lot of the data stuff came from that, because Adam had started with spreadsheets, and honestly, I was running too many horses. I am a proud owner of some glue farm myself, and you just who wants to collect data? There's an API. Oh, cool. Let's just start grabbing some data.
So yeah, I need to get involved in that API life, because Des has now pulled some really cool stuff from the API. I'm actually sitting here looking at my little spreadsheet right in front of me that I've been manually entering stuff into for I feel like a crazy person doing it. But I think the interesting thing is that the data does matter so much in this game. It's the way you can make informed decisions. It's one of the only ways, especially when you're talking about having 100 horses or 200 horses or things like that. So that's how the relationship started there. And now, Adam, where did you come along? Actually, first, I want to point on this, where Des, you were kind of saying this earlier right before we got on, to Dr. Ian's point about the generation that owns real horses versus who might want to own virtual horses. We were literally just talking about that. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think so. Man, it should be a fun drinking game every time I bring up my background in real thoroughbred racing. You'd be drunk as hell. But anyways, because I have that background, I've seen the clientele who are really into horse racing, which is a much, much older crowd. I think the people that go to the track and even really lively tracks, like by me in Del Mar, they're going for the party. They really do not care about the horse races. They're betting on the names, things like that. So the people who are actually handicapping, owning these horses is a much older crowd. And what I love about Zed is it's bringing it to the younger population and getting them really excited.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting point. So I wanted to touch on that because I thought that was fun. But so Adam, where does Zed Gazette then start with you guys? So you've found Zed Run, you've got Ian hooked, you pulled him away from watching college football, which that would be a hard thing to do. So
that's more fun than college football. Now, it wasn't a Sunday. The Cowboys they weren't losing last season, so I I was like, oh, I can get away from this.
So where does the idea for Zed Gazette come in, and how did that all originate? Because that's some of the, premier kind of content that we've seen in the space so far. So where does that whole story start?
Thank you. I'm glad you guys like the content, right? Dr. Ian and I talked about it for way too long, trying to figure it out. But it kind of started because it was so scattered throughout all these different websites from different community managers that had been a part of the team at some point. And I was like, and I was tired of answering questions. Right. So Zed Gazette just got everything copy and pasted from the 3 websites, and there's Zed Gazette. And then I waited for some people to show up and started writing some articles and kind of telling what we thought up. So
that's
Adam
awesome.
Deserves all of the credit for the website and coming up with the names. We would spend hours talking about this, but my day job's too busy. I wouldn't write the articles. So Adam. It's his brain work. I just feel like I kind of push it a little bit here and there, So
that's awesome. So let's get into kind of, I want to touch on, and I want the majority of this to be about kind of the breeding, the data, what is important for people to look at and why, and things of that nature, because I do think, when somebody new finds Zed, there's kind of a progression in how you approach the game, right? It's, oh, this is cool. Oh, I need a horse. Oh, I'm going to run my horse. Oh, my horse sucks. Oh, how do I
need more horses?
Now
what?
What? Yeah, now what?
Yeah, now what? Exactly. So,
I was going to say, what do you think we're playing? Do you think we're playing a game of racing or a game of breeding horses? Because it really matters what you think, what you want to look at the data, and what matters to you.
That is a great way to start. So let's go, Chamber. What are we playing? A racing game or a breeding game?
What I do every day, guys, Ian and Adam, is I message these 2 guys and I say, what the hell are we doing? And I get them, and every day I put out a message in the morning and I say, can somebody talk me down from racing my Z2 Nakamoto? I have it, it's unraced, but it's the last thing I have before the next drop. That can go in a Griffin. So every day they talk me off the ledge. I don't race it. But from what I'm getting from them is we're in a breeding game. What we're doing is we are, we're growing our stable. We're trying to find out which ones are the winners. We're testing those new horses that we're breeding, seeing which ones are working, checking their, I haven't been doing it religiously, but checking their data on Discord in regards to odds and that kind of thing in different races. So I'm doing that a little bit more. But really trying to figure out which ones are going to work long term, and then ideally breeding those with other horses that you have that are also good, that can make new horses. So I think at the end of the day, we want to be breeding horses as much as possible and selling.
I'm so proud, Joe.
Look, hey,
who's in the breeding camp? Who's the game of breeding camp?
We're in the game of breeding camp. However, I've subscribed to Zed Gazette University since day one, so I've been molded to know that I might be in the breeding game, right? But I think that's why this is an important conversation to have, because you do kind of fall into that progression. So Dr. Ian, tell us why you believe we are in a breeding game and not a racing game.
Okay, so when I thought about the game from like there's going to be 38,000 Genesis horses, and then we sat around and said, well, I think at some point I ended with like 100 horses. It's like, well, how many players are going to play this game? So when you think about a community and how big it can be from that end, there's that aspect. Other aspect is it was pre-December. There was the race algorithm changed. So some of the horses, the Genesis horses and the bred horses that time performed differently, where really like a quarter of them are still really highly performant, which is like that profile one that like that Adam likes to talk about. But like, so it made sense that I was like, okay, like you're gonna have to generate new horses to make other horses. There's going to be, a genetic algorithm that kind of plays into that. And it was Adam actually had a buddy that had the algorithm's race algorithm change was a dominant Buterin. It was like a Z20. It was like one of the first Z18s I'd ever seen. And this horse was fast. And when you start looking at the data, you're like, okay, like, because like Adam was like trying to talk me to the game, and like I knew I couldn't afford the Z1s and the Z2s at that time. And I was like, how did someone new get into this game, right? Like, how do you bring new members of the community? How do you grow to 10,000 users, 100,000 users? Like, you have to allow some way to let them in, and that's where it makes sense in the breeding algorithm. Adam and I've also seen some information from the devs that for fastest run times, and they're almost all bred horses. Like Pinkman's across half of them. I mean, he's a phenomenal horse, but like you're like, okay, it's bred horses, there's only so many good Genesis horses too. Like that's the other thing I was gonna say. Like there's only so many good Genesis horses. How can you have a good ecosystem like that? Like it's too static. That's why it's from that end.
Interesting. So I totally would agree with you there. Like when you think about how this game progresses after the Genesis horses are claimed, right? Like the game doesn't end there, right? Otherwise it would have to, if we're just talking about these horses and that the fact that breeding isn't there or isn't going to outperform those horses, that would mean the game would kind of have to end. And so I remember kind of having that light bulb moment, and I messaged Adam and I was like, oh, here, this. And he's like, yes, you understand now. And I'm like, okay, there you go. Welcome. Right. Exactly. So
you were probably one of the first in the community to really get this. So we'll leave that from there. But
well, you just kind of have to think about what the end game is, right? And how long it could possibly go. I think that's the kingpin, right? So you have, it's funny because my brother and I kind of play the game together. We talk all the time, and he was very race the horse. I'm racing horses, and now he has kind of seen the light bulb as well, because his bred horses are outperforming anything he ever had in Genesis, and they were on Dez's leaderboard today, which was pretty cool to see. So he, awesome. Which was really cool.
Always fun.
So let's think about then what. Now we've said, okay, we're playing a breeding game, right? Now, how intricate, Adam, does something like that have to be to really get into, generations and generations and generations down the line? And what kind of comparisons can you draw from, Dez's passion of real life horse racing?
Well, yeah, that's. I didn't just look at the genetic algorithms. I did look at the historical, patterns of breeding in different areas of the country. I mean, not kind of world, right? See what's going on in Australia, what they're doing. See what's going on in England, the history there in America, and it's always really come down to third cousins, right? Is the fold back in, and that's where the recursive nature of the mare being, coming back out. That's where that third cousin line actually becomes possible for the first time. So that's where I really noticed the recursive nature and really noticed the the breeding game aspect of it. But going back to what Dr. Reno was saying, it's this game came out right about the time CryptoKitties did, right? And that is just a breeding game, definitely. So that's where I took and applied the lessons of that game to this one and said, what is similar about these, and kind of dove into the GAs from there and said, where do I think the people that wrote the GA are from, and looked at those countries and just kind of tried to build it from there.
So let's talk about the genetic algorithm piece. So Des, you were saying that you actually were talking to your uncle. Was it your uncle?
It was my uncle. Yeah.
This past week, and you explained Zed to him, and then your uncle sent you genetic algorithm. So let's touch on this piece really quick, because so when you say GA, Adam, you're referring to genetic algorithm, and so what? Des, why do you think your uncle sent you a genetic algorithm white paper to read, or a thesis paper to read?
Yeah, and then the first thing I did was I sent it over to Adam and go, "Have you heard of this theory?" So yeah, no, I think he understands like the real horse racing world is physical horse racing world is about breeding, just like we're talking right now. It's the real horse racing world is not a racing game either. It's a breeding game. If you want to make money as a stable, you not only have to perform on the racetrack, but you have to build a great, breeding farm and sell those ponies. So he understands and has that background. And I think, instantly when he heard about this game, and I thought it was going to be met with a lot of resistance given kind of his age and his experience and stuff. But he was very into the idea of kind of, making a very digital breeding platform. And he was all about it. So he initially went to, all right, well then if this is very based on formula, nature is even more random. This is beatable. There's inefficiencies, there's things you can go after. So he was all about it.
I think that's a really good point to touch on, or a really good segue. So Dr. Ian, when we're talking about, what this genetic algorithm might look like from a data standpoint, and just like how many pieces of data we might need to start coming up with some conclusions on what works and what doesn't. Where do you see that from your experience so far?
Well, I mean, we've done a fair amount of GA research. I actually, as a computer scientist, I didn't really look into it until this game, but I've read many papers now, I've watched many presentations and many talks. So so this game, I believe you can exploit the GA using kind of the techniques that Adam's talked about, some of the things we've kind of put together. You have to kind of think about, from when you're looking at genetic algorithms, the biggest thing you start looking at is the crossover and the crossover mechanisms for actually how do you take DNA from two samples and make future samples, right? And so when you really look at that, I actually think uniform crossover is a piece of that, simply because the research demonstrates that in what is referred to as big O notation of actually getting to a population of a better population, of horses or samples in our lifetime, you need to use uniform crossover to actually make that happen. So you start thinking, okay, uniform crossover is a piece of that, but then you've got the aspects of the DNA like the bloodline. That's determinate. The bloodline, when you put two horses together, what it's going to come out, right? So you have to start breaking down okay, what types of genetic algorithms have that? And you start looking at different crossover points. So I think it's actually referred to as a two crossover point. I have a nice chart we'll share out at some point here, but you've got a piece where it's the bloodline, it'll be the gender, and then it's like that. You've got the race performance, which based on the documentations out there is fatigue, gait, distance preference, gait preference, and there's a fourth one out there, and then color. Right. And I think that in the middle, for all the what are really the racing characteristics of the horse minus the color and the bloodline aspect, that part is a uniform crossover piece to that. And we've got some more articles we can share with that, but the research really lends that direction. Now, mutation is a huge piece of this. Adam talks a lot about mutation, and based on the research, the smaller the population, the higher mutation rates to get to not an inbred group. So think about the Nakamoto's only having 2,000 Genesis horses compared to the Buterins having, I think it's 20,000 Genesis horses that'll be out there. Mutation rates based on which ones you're breeding will vary. So there's a lot that goes into play there. But I think ultimately, do you think we can sort of game the GA? Yeah, I truly do. Have we proven some ideas of that? We've seen some samples of that, but it's going to take a few more iterations to really, really see what we got. That break in breeding for the last 6 weeks slowed us down, but last week was great.
Yeah, last week was fun to be the first, our first experience with it. I thought it was pretty wild. And so Chamber, did you understand any of that? Can you now, are you a genetic algorithm expert?
I mean, I took a few notes, but I believe I can basically call myself a doctor at this point.
I don't know. Let's not disrespect Ian like that.
Okay, I can call myself a chiropractor at this point.
Okay, fine, deal. But so let's talk about the mutation rate piece, because I think that Adam or Ian, you're correct. That is something that Adam talks about a lot. And I think, when you first hear it described, it almost has kind of a counterintuitive nature to it. So Adam, can you kind of describe what that mutation rate in your mind looks like, why it's important, and how, why it is that like counterintuitive almost?
Yeah, I think you think mutation, you're going to get something good, right? Like X-Men style, and most likely it's going to be a three-legged horse that can't run with the Nakamoto's, right? Because they have such a small population with the Sazabos that to get all of the DNA that's possible, you're just going to have that mutation. And the big thing that I haven't really touched on a lot with mutation is it impacts the timeline of improvement for bloodlines. So since Buterins are going to be easier to breed, the timeline of their acceleration and performance is going to be much quicker than Nakamoto's and Sazabos, because you're not going to be able to stack the DNA in the same way as easily, right? So the mutation rate not only accelerates the timeline for Buterins, but just the general user, because that's the most accessible. So it's definitely a breeding game for the community that way.
Interesting. Des, what do you think about that?
Yeah, at first when I was reading through some of the theories, we talked about mutation, just like Adam just said, Buterins are easier to breed, and I didn't really understand what that meant. So just for those who are listening who are a little confused by that, that just means that there are more Buterins and they're more accessible to the public and more breeding options. I think one thing that we can talk about a little bit is some theories on, is it good to breed across bloodlines, or should you stay very purebred and breed Buterins with Buterins and Nakamoto's with Nakamoto's? And what would be the disadvantage of doing that? I know Adam has some theories on that as well, and that's something I'm curious about.
Oh yeah, well, Dr. Ian is always trying to breed across bloodlines, and I'm always like, no, what are you doing? Right? I don't help with those horses.
That's interesting. So, all right. So, what is the case for doing that, and what is the case against doing that?
Too many variables that aren't controlled. Right? Because if you're just using Nakamoto on Nakamoto, you know that you're working within the Nakamoto variable spectrum. If you're doing it across bloodlines, you don't know what variables are adjusted for. And you don't know if they're adjusted differently between bloodlines. So it's just too many variables out of control, and that's where it comes back to the twins. But
so it's harder to repeat, really. If you if you get lucky-ish, you wouldn't be able to necessarily repeat or know how to repeat it because of the many variables, is what you're saying.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, interesting. What were you? Sorry, I cut you off there, Dr. Ian. What?
I'll let him explain his. He feels lucky on it sometimes.
Actually, well, so early on, I have a horse named Penny Lane, and she's half Buterin and half Finny, and she's still a today still is a really good horse. So I saw early on that you could take what I think the two bloodlines that are close to each other. And I've seen good samples of those two bloodlines on each other, and then Sazabos and Nakamoto's. Now the question, Vanilla Bean's out there, and that horse is a really interesting horse. You should go out there and look at that. There's gonna be some of these just horses that I think they're gonna be freaks that the mutation's gonna work in a way that is positive as opposed to negative, right? From that end. I have a chart, and should I just send a PDF to y'all? What are y'all thinking, or just share it?
You can click on the little share button.
Okay.
And then it should pop up on my
end.
I'll bring that right up.
It says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Let's see. Yes.
Sure.
Are you sure?
Are you sure you want to do this?
Chamber's kind of a wild card. There we go.
Can y'all see that?
Last chance to keep your secrets to yourself.
That's right. I'll share them out.
No, he was supposed to edit the article a week ago.
Yeah.
There you go.
We've had things going on. Okay. I don't know if that's large. Is that big enough, or keep expanding that? You zoom in on this a little bit more.
Yeah.
How's that?
All right, there you go.
That's great.
I think this is what the GA looks like. I think it's this kind of, I can explain kind of what we've got on here. So you've got the sire and the dam using the same terminology. I've got a blue and pink here, and it's actually a cross, for example, just to kind of demonstrate what's up. So the middle sections is this uniform crossover. it's definitely in bits. Everything's powers of 2. A lot of the conversations out of my end up being powers of 2, which is a very computer science thing. So everything in that place, I'm guessing it's around that many. I don't actually know. I have some theories on why I think it's 1 billion bits, but we can get to that in a second. But you can see that your bloodline's going to be determinate, and then your color is that other piece that isn't really part of the GA. My theory, or really Adam and my theories together, is that the mare is this middle green section that's more dominant. And if you look at that, the mare has been playing much bigger place in the DNA, because really the colts, you get to sell their DNA, right? You get to sell it out. So to make a mare as valuable, this is where the balance is in place. And I think the developers then added that color section, which is more determinant on the sire. If you go look at the formulas, you can see that the male, it's actually has a higher influence on the color, which doesn't matter at all in race performance. Sorry, color rubbers. Sorry. So like, end of the day, that's what you've got here. Now, what our theory is, if you kind of go down to this next level, is like we Adam and I do twins. He's got the Gazette's got some good papers on twin theory. But we think it's this concept of having, I call it a coin, because if you've got uniform crossover, you're going to have one or the other. That's what that middle is. So you can have an A or a B side of a coin, and then you have mutations. So you've got an A prime and a B prime. So you effectively, I like to breed, I always like to double tap anytime I'm breeding. I think if it's worth breeding, it's worth doing it twice, because then you could see both sides of the coin. Sometimes you get a racer and sometimes you get a breeder. And there's more to that, coming on in the future here. But I think the GA and the way that it works is a lot like that. That middle section, though, I really believe from my computer science research and looking at what that looks, that uniform crossover really explains that. So, but the mutation rate, the number of loci or bits, if you will, that will be mutated is higher in Nakamoto than it is Buterin, because of the fact that, like I said, Buterins are easy to breed, but they're also, you're more likely to get a class 5 horse. No disrespect. I have some great class 5 horses I love. You're less likely to get a class 1 horse, right? But 2 Nakamotos, you're more likely to get a class 1 horse in that sense, but higher mutation. It's yeah, class 3 often, very often. If you have a glue farm like me, you've got plenty of class 3 of those, right? So, that's
that may not be a bad thing, though. There's plenty of class 5 profitable horses out there, right? And at the end of the day, it takes people to be winning races to keep the whole thing alive in some respect, right? So while this may be the key to unlock all of the great performers, you still need people to race them. There still needs to be an appropriate class system where people can win, right? Like otherwise, like that's still part of the game. That was really interesting. Des, what are your thoughts on that?
Drink number 3. So back to my physical horse racing background. People own horses to win. They, if you gave them a choice that they could come in 4th or third, even 3rd in a grade 1 stakes versus win a 10,000 maiden claimer, a lot of people would say, I want that feeling of being in the winner's circle with my jockey, taking the picture. Like, that's such a big part of horse racing, is that feeling of winning. So whether it's in class 5 or class 1, I think, like you guys said, it's very important just to have a winning horse.
Yeah. So I do want to touch on a couple things that you guys have mentioned a few times, that Adam has a bunch of great articles on, but I want to take the time where we actually have where you can articulate the thought to touch on the twins theory, right? Like, I think because that's a good place for people to start experimenting. So Chamber, if you could bring up that one chart that Adam put out the other day on his family tree, and I'll kind of let you, Adam, walk through what this looks like and explain maybe the twins piece.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're looking at is a family tree of 2 horses I made, actually, right? So I have 2 horses with the same identical tree going down. It wasn't really to breed the best racer. It was really to just test what works and what doesn't, so that when we have the right ingredients, we can make a good horse. And what I did is all of these colors represent a Genesis Z10. As you can see, Storming By is a colt. He's in there 3 times. Contained Sugar is another colt, in there twice. And Little Effort is the orange, and she's up in both the top and left corners. And what's unique about those top and left corners is you can see it Storming By and Little Effort twice. Those are twins that I can use for testing, mutation and the crossover patterns, but also I can use them in the process of inbreeding in the future. And inbreeding is a huge, like I said, factor of real life horses, right? 500,000 horses come from one super stud with 28, other horses playing a large influence, but it's an inbred, thoroughbred game,
So touch on what you mean, just for anybody who may not know the inbreeding piece. Like, what does that actually mean?
It just really means bringing back in the same DNA and folding it on top of itself, right? So up on top, these purple circles, these are all legendary breed horses that came off of the Genesis. And you can view them all as siblings or cousins eventually, right? Since they all are off, or three of the sets are from Storming By, right? So that's like our great grandparents. If they had the brother and sister, and then it went weird, and then you met someone 3 generations down, and that's your third cousin. So basically, that's what we're doing with these horses. And the important thing is the exclusive breed, the brown circles, because that's where the recursive nature of the mares comes in. So if you have an exclusive mare, you are able to breed back into a Genesis horse, and the offspring will maintain that exclusive breed. So that gives you the ability. I just ran out of horses, right? Because I need the mares. But on the right tree, I'm going to, when next month and their breeding cycles refresh, I'll breed that exclusive on the right back into Supreme Line, the blue dot, and into Contain Sugar if I have the ability to. That's someone else's horses. That's another community aspect of this, right? I have to know who owns Contain Sugar, hit them up, be like, yo, I need that DNA. But at the same time, you run the risk of, they could jack up the prices because they know what you're doing. So that's another part of that community aspect of this game. But it's not over, right? This elite breed black dot, if you just go back up to the 2 previous exclusives, I can breed them back into Genesis, add more DNA to the inbreeding plan, and fold them back in again and make another elite horse, right? And after elite, you can't maintain that elite breed. So that's where I think they'll be the best racers, where you lose the ability to add more DNA.
Yeah, so let's touch on that, because I've heard that from your articles, one of which you put out, I think, this week, and then before the show, Des actually said the exact same thing about the potential of the elites being the best racers in the game. So, Dr. Ian, where does that kind of theory kind of come from there?
Well, I mean, that kind of what he's calling that recursive loop there for exclusives. If you look at the breeding chart, we noticed that was there, and it wasn't. I think like a lot of things in this game aren't accidental. They're sort of there. So we've recognized that that's there, and it's worth taking advantage of. Also, if you look at genetic algorithm research, which we have, second and third, basically breeding seconds and third cousins does lead to more optimized, or say quicker optimized or performed populations, if you will. So you kind of have that into it, and then on top of that, the research Adam did on the actual horses. I mean, Des, you're into real horses, so but Adam found a few papers on where do these horses come from. You're like, okay, this clearly was something that happened in real life. So, and then GAs, to your point earlier, are replicated off nature. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to be really observant and then ask good questions, and then willing to test them out and try out. And then if Adam and I don't get butthurt if our theories don't work out, we're cool. We'll just move on and we stay agile. There's not enough information of this game. I mean, the Gazette didn't exist until Adam. We had to ask so many questions over beers and beers and beers to put this together.
That's the best way to ask questions, I feel like. So and you'd be really hammered if you played the Des drinking game. So I also like to the point about the elites being potentially the best racers, because there's almost a diminishing return afterwards, when you breed down that line. And I think part of the reason too was the cost to get to an elite, right? Versus, and so Adam, maybe you want to touch on that really quickly.
Yeah, so there was a user in the Discord, Yip Talk, I think that's how you say his name, right? He came up and said, how can bred horses not be better than Genesis when you have to put so much in to reach, an elite breed? How much does it cost to get to that horse, right? And then you sit down and you start adding that up. And I did. And I was like, holy shit, those are going to be expensive horses to get good ones, right? Like that's where they have to be. And when you notice the mares collecting DNA, all right, then it's definitely that.
That's
It's
very interesting. Yeah. Chamber, what do you think there? I feel like I can see your head smoking. So there must be.
So I have a question, I guess. As you're breeding and as you're like I was saying before, you know, we're breeding, we're testing, seeing which ones are profitable horses. Is it worth it to sell any of them right now? Even if you think they're duds, even if you think they're destined for the glue factory, those
I would hang on to them.
Yeah, especially because I'm just looking at mine now. All of mine are at least 90% of them are Genesis bred horses. So like the ones that I've bred, they're legendary. I don't even think I've bred down to elite status yet. So would you say if for people listening or watching, keep those?
I'd say so. It really comes down to your strategy of stable construction, right? So if you can go deep or wide, I'd actually say if you have the Genesis horses that they came from, I've let some of mine go, but if you have them and you have the legendary horse, now you actually control that DNA, as Adam likes to say. So really controlling that DNA structure, because now you can play as that tree structure. You need a lot of pieces, right?
Right.
It's worth, if you have a few you like, or if you end up with a bred horse that is really, really solid, like I have Penny Lane, I'm not going to let her parents go.
I've lost to Penny Lane.
Huh?
Yeah, me too. I was thinking
I've
that too
lost
when he
the
said
Penny
it.
Lane.
No, she,
I
you
got
know,
my
I let her
butt
back
kicked.
out, I let her back out of the cage like last week, and but like,
I got my butt
I'm
kicked.
her parents now. I'm never going to sell her parents because like I might be able to make another Penny Lane, right? And then I've got to I've had some not good horses come off of her, so it's like. I'd say really the game is like, I feel like you're going to spend a lot of money up front getting a couple Genesis horses or a handful, and then you're going to do some breeding, and you're just going to keep folding your bred horses back on each other because it's pound for pound the best way to build a stable. Like it's Moneyball approach, if you will. I can't go out and unfortunately there was an incident where I lost my Z2 Genesis Shadowfax. Unfortunately, I can't go out and spend that money and get her back, right? So I have to kind of play with the legendary horses I have at this point from that end. Just Genesis horses are really too expensive to get at this point. So.
If you don't mind me asking, did you lose it like accidentally, like you lost a wallet address?
So when Matic OpenSea popped up, the indexing of actually like the order of horses was actually an oldest of horses, not newest of horses. I thought I was going to my Z10s and selling them, and it was my Z2s. It is what it. And the individual who acquired her is less than savory. We'll move on. He's not worth any more air. So it is what it is. And the devs, it is what it is. Like, there just is what it is.
It is what it is.
So be careful. My advice to those watching home: have a secondary stable that you want to sell from, and that way you can limit that out. Because
it's a good point.
Shadowfax, as Rohan's finest of Middle Earth, Shadowfax would have been, I had her for a reason, and unfortunately I don't. So
yeah, that's rough. But I think that's a really interesting point, right? Because I think what is happening right now is all of the people that are joining the game, they're going through that progression, and they are eventually going to get to a point where they're like, man, I shouldn't have sold my Genesis horses, or man, I wish I still had some of those offspring. And so it's interesting to hear that kind of, and I think important to maybe hear that up front, because it is not a inexpensive game to play, right? So at some point you do want to either recoup some of your investment or make some kind of profit. And I think the easiest way to do that at the moment is either sell your Genesis horse or flip the offspring that are good, right? So I think it's important to hear that for some people that are going to be going into breeding for the first time, and they might breed some studs, and they're thinking, okay, well, I'll have my Genesis horse, I'll keep that, I'll sell the gun I just bred away, and where a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, they'll wish they had that legendary. And I keep saying this too, Chamber. I think I kind of keep.
I'm in the middle of canceling orders on Matic.
Well, I think I keep saying this to you too, right? Where it's like, once these Genesis horses are gone and new
Mhm.
players keep coming into the game, what's the next highest entry point? It's these legendary horses that are bred
Right.
off of them, right? Like, so
Mhm.
they're going to be very important. Would you agree with that, Adam?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And touching on, the value of some horses not presenting themselves yet, Sazabos are super underperforming their population size and value on the market, right? The cost of them. So the first thing I noticed when Ebbs released some new photos was like the legs of the horses are bending differently in the mock-ups coming out. And then you see them jumping in the 3D thing, right? So I think that there's some steeplechases coming that Sazabos should, present themselves to be more valuable on the track. So I would definitely hold on to your Sazabos. Don't give up those.
Yeah, don't let those go. Hang on to them.
Yeah.
I agree too. I think there'll be a reason to own them.
For sure.
Yeah, there would have to be, right? I would think.
I really hope so. Right, I'm holding
But
on
I
to
think
some. Like,
Yeah.
I think that again goes to the point of how early in the game we actually are, right? Like if we're really talking, genetic algorithms and billions of iterations, right? Like we're at the very, very, very earliest piece where the only factor in raceability right now is distance, right? And then, you're talking about, okay, maybe I have a dud at right now, but when the weather is introduced or when gate preference is introduced, that could boost your horse another 10% than what it's doing right now, right? And then all of a sudden now I have Genesis horses that I can breed off of because now I know what they're good at, right? So I think that's interesting. But Chamber, let's throw a couple of Dez's charts up here and let's see what the guys think about some of the data that Dez has pulled. We're going to put Dez against the data scientist here, and let's see what we think about this. So, Dez, what are we looking at right here? We've got win rate by breed type. So, what did we pull?
Sure. So yeah, breed type being Genesis, legendary, exclusive, just the order we talked about recently. And then it's by racing class. So class 1 to class 5, and then all kind of summed together. And then their win rate. So just to be clear, if the amount of elites put into class 1, they win 9% of those races. So that's what we're kind of looking at here. I'm curious to hear thoughts. I can give my theory on what this means. I think this is, out of the ones that I've put together, this one kind of can start to get conclusive a little bit, but obviously, further analysis is always needed. But yeah.
So what are your takeaways here? And then we'll throw it to Dr. Ian and Adam.
I think it's fairly clear. So you have to take into account this was done over 10,000 races. By no means is that, an incredible amount, but it is a substantial sample size to draw from. And what you see here is the largest win percentage, as we've seen, is from Genesis, although following very closely is a gap between Genesis, Legendary, Exclusive, and then you come to Elite. Now, as we were talking about earlier, there might be some bias introduced into here, right? Horses that get down to Elite were obviously bred with purpose, and the people paying up money to get there are actually probably doing it right compared to those people who are just throwing money at the wall for Genesis to breed to Legendary. But it is interesting how it's kind of started to create a gap between these different breed types, and you actually see elites perform quite well in even these very high class races.
So, Dr. Ian, what are your thoughts on this data that Des pulled?
I think this is pretty interesting. It's really interesting. A couple questions. I mean, did you take into account like is it these Nakamoto's, or is there any distribution on that? Is there a distribution on? And this is just win rate. I'm trying to think of the actual distribution of elite horses compared to the total population. That's the only thing I'd be curious about to see. But I think this is pretty interesting. I think we've seen with Nakamoto's that there's a lot of dog shit like legendary Nakamoto's out there, and there's not. So it does send to lend itself in that end. I'd be curious if, let's say, Buterins, maybe it's exclusives, right? I'd be curious what the distributions look like, but I think this is really cool. I think it's very interesting.
Interesting. So, and that idea that there would be some less than great Nakamoto legendaries would lend back to the idea of the mutation rate, correct? If we're
Yes.
completing the circle, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, Adam, what do you think of that? Same kind of thoughts there. It kind of proves a little bit that we're seeing good elite racers, but I think that's true. The bloodline we should probably take a look at that, right?
I think we can see the bloodline, right?
Interesting.
Like elites on class 3 are going to be Nakamoto's, and then the little bit up is going to be Finnies and Sazabos, and then you get a little gap to class 5, and you see that's going to be the Buterins down there, right? So you can see that there's already a pickup in Nakamoto's in class 3, right, by exclusive, right? That's where they're all going to start playing for elites down there. Like that, we have Hey Jude is down there in class 3 most of the time. Atari's a class 3 horse. Those really first iterations of the mares being folded back in is happening, and the elites are coming out pretty quickly. So there's not a lot of stacking of DNA yet. So it makes sense that the Nakamoto's would still be in class 3 on elite.
Interesting.
I'll be curious to how that changes with time, because if you think about, let's just think about the number of breeding cycles, right? Let's say we're 100 breeding cycles in the future. You're gonna have many more pacers and those types of horses. I'll be really curious to how that distribution changes. But to the point we were making earlier, it's a game of breeding. And that chart, I think, really well demonstrates that.
Absolutely. I would totally agree. What was the other chart that we put together for today here? Okay, so now this is the one where we're probably not going to find something conclusive, which I think is a great, I think the, flip side of the same coin, right? Where Dr. Ian can yell at the color rubbers, I think. So what are we looking at, Des?
I wanted to find something so conclusive throughout this. And, I posted to Twitter today, sometimes you got to have a theory, test it, and then admit when it fails. This is probably one of those. But I was really trying to look for a correlation in coat color and distance preference. And it's something.
Yeah, this came from a conversation you and I were having, right? Where we were
exactly
after I read Adam's article where he, laid out the colors and their descriptions. You can almost kind of feel like they were trying to hint at something, right? So that's why we, kind of ended up pulling this one, right?
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, there are some interesting tidbits, and it does almost look correlative, but I'll be very honest here. It's not. There's quite a bit of spiking as far as distance preference that doesn't follow kind of the linear progression, or just really dispersion. So, there's many horses that are great, many different coat colors that are great at 2000 and 1800. It's not exclusive to one type of coat color. But it was interesting data to pull. I think, again, sample size is so important, and 10,000 races might seem like a lot, but it's definitely not a lot when you think of long-term, how many we're going to have.
So, Dr. Ian, is this why you're saying color doesn't matter for race performance, correct?
So when I started the game, was really into color. I'll admit, I'm a recovering color addict.
That's great. Well, that's great because
Adam beat me up a lot for that. And to the point that we had a conversation with one of the lead devs, and I just straight asked him, and he said, no, color doesn't matter at all. He did say that it could matter in the future, I think, relative to maybe surface, like if they're running on clay or grass or weather. And I'm still one of those people that hope it matters, but I can tell you it does not. But I wanted to. I'm one of those people that want it to matter, and it does not matter in breeding. Please stop repping colors on each other.
Adam, would you concur?
Yeah. That's kind of, everyone's got their own theories, and they're worth being tested. But as Des said, sometimes you got to leave some theories behind. And after so much,
you got to move on.
For
From that
so
one,
many
I
months,
had to let that one go.
I was like, guys, can we stop this?
Well, I mean,
what about supercoats? I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on supercoats?
They're all pretty shit racers, right?
Yeah, I think with color, it's going to be, look, if people place value on something being more rare than performance, I think that's totally fine. and because you see it in all kinds of other collectible NFT type things. Even, some of us come from the physical card space, and all of that kind of stuff. Rarity matters. So if that's something that if you do end up producing a monster racer and it's got a rare coat, like, great, maybe the value goes higher. But
Lucky Jack
when we're
makes a good
talking
point
just
on that.
performance,
Just like
what's
a
his
rare
point?
a super rare good racer is going to be more valuable than a common rare racer, just because it is what it is,
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Especially Cole, people are gonna. I mean, you made the point. We're gonna want to tap a rare color more than a non-rare. It means you're more likely to get a rare color and as an offspring. So, I wanted color to matter. I really did. I looked and I looked. Just couldn't make myself believe it after a while.
That's funny. I think was that all the charts that we had for these guys today?
I have one more. The visual on this one, I don't know if we can see it that well.
Yeah, it's a little faint. But honestly, this one was just so that Joe could flex with his family being on the chart.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, so my brother and my sister-in-law actually were the number 6 performing stable here yesterday. So
wow.
Shout out to them. They had 15 wins yesterday. That's pretty crazy.
Big time. That's High Horse Stables.
That's High Horse Stables, and they have all of their offspring they name after strains, if you will. So, they've got a pretty cool theme going on, I think, as well.
Nice.
So you could, if you see Sour Tsunami on the track, that's
I got whooped by Sour Tsunami the other day.
I have a theme myself for name. Actually, Adam and I both have themes, but they're very different. So, but I suggest having a naming convention. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to rebrand mine. I think I need to rebrand and go with something a little more consistent. Because now there's actually 3 other people that have some iteration of my stable name. So
I've been trying to go with like TV references, and so I got a couple. But I tried to get, I was telling the guys before, I was trying to get Peter Nincompoop from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And they said I couldn't use it because it was using a curse word or something. I'm like, Nincompoop is a curse word? I was very upset.
Yeah, they made a Coke dealer, so it's that's even more bothersome, right?
Right.
Sold one called Coke dealer out of the marketplace.
I have ignorant shit, so like that's the one, and I bought that as a Genesis horse. So I think you could probably dispute that one, Chamber. So Chamber, what I feel like you've had an epiphany during this episode, because I feel like maybe we've turned you from a racer to a breeder potentially. What are your thoughts?
I would argue that I've been a breeder the whole time. I would say on the drop, what was the first thing I asked you to do? What was the first deal we did?
Oh yeah, you wanted a female because you had too many males in your stable. Yeah,
I had a lot of dongs in the stable. So I had an inkling that having some fillies might be a good idea. I don't know why. But a good mix, and the fact that you could breed your colt 7 times in a month, and you could only breed your filly twice in a month, which I thought lent more value to the filly.
Almost like twins were intended.
Right.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Interesting.
Like two sides of a coin, even?
Yeah.
But I would say the epiphany that I got today was really just getting deeper. I've been talking to Joe and Des about how I do a lot of like family lines in real life. Like I do a lot of family tree stuff, like just from my own family. But getting that formula down within your own stable. Like those third generation or your third cousins, that kind of stuff, folding the mare back in afterwards. That to me is very interesting. And obviously it's going to take more than a 45-minute conversation. We'll have to dig into that a little bit more, but I think that's the big takeaway from today is maybe don't give Joe was mentioned before is, breaking even on some of the investments that you've made by selling some of those offsprings. I immediately after this discussion just went in and I had 3 horses for sale, and I just canceled all 3 of those. I'm like, let's hold off for a second.
Let's hold your horses.
Let's say, hold your horses. But I think that's interesting. So I'm going to do a little bit more research there. And then after the last drop, having spent, a good chunk of change, and thinking that was going to be my purchase, I think next drop,
you're back in harder.
We're going to go in hard again. And with a little bit better focus on, because last time it was click, 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 let's grab whatever I could get, and ended up with a lot of Colts. But I think having a little bit more purpose, not really caring that much about color, which was maybe a thing I was looking at the first go. Might not, but really getting a good mix of fillies and Colts in the next drop might be a good idea.
Des, what are your key takeaways from today's episode? Things that you learned that you want to explore some more after this conversation?
Zed Gazette is a must follow on all platforms and a great read. I'm such an audio person. I wish someone would just go out there and narrate all the posts that Adam puts out, just so I can listen to in the background.
That's going to be our next endeavor. It's going to be Zed Gazette read by the Mint Condition.
I'd do it just so I'd have it myself. But no, I think we just need to keep testing. It's a group game. So we talked about that it's a game and it's a breeding game, but it's also a group effort, right? We have to kind of band together, figure these things out, share information right now. I talked about it on a different show that I equate this to almost like medical registries, like clinical trials. We need to have the power of multiple stables to really kind of dig into this data and this breeding data. And I think that's where it's going. We're so early. That's my last takeaway is we're so early on this stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so. I think so too. So let's close it up here. Dr. Ian and Adam, what can we expect next from some Zed Gazette articles? What Easter eggs are you going to plant for the community this time?
I think we need the 1000th one to come out from Dr. Ian soon. So we'll work on that. But I think the big things are going to be about really just talking about the odds a little bit more and what you're looking for when you're breeding. What odds matter more than the others and that kind of stuff, right?
I think that's a really good point. So before I close it up then, because that just reminded me. So what I did want to bring this up. What did you make of what we saw last week when we got some of those, I would call them super freaks at this point, where we were seeing, $1 odds that were pushing other horses out to 50 and 200 and things like that, which we had never seen before. It ended up being, a kind of a glitch in the breeding process. But what did that kind of tell you guys about, what is potentially possible or what we could potentially see in the future?
I think
genetic algorithms are designed to improve a population of species over a time. And this game has a GA. So I would say that we expect over time that there'll be some horses of the population that still race to be better. And that your horses that are fast now may be pretty average in 2 years, 3 years. That's my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And it's weird to call it a glitch because the game worked. The odds were red. The races ran.
Explain that, because I think that's a good point. And I shouldn't have called it that. Yeah.
Right. No. The devs are calling it, right. Let them call them what they want to call it, right? If they want to call it a glitch, we can call it a glitch. But I call it a glitch in breeding, not a glitch in racing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. No, totally. Because what happened was it took essentially 4 parents instead of 2. Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So just a super stack of inbred horse right there. Right, so that
which is essentially what you're potentially trying to do down the line that we're just spent the entire conversation talking about, right? Ian?
Yeah, so they just jumped us right into the future and seeing it, right? Those horses are going to be freaks when it's done, right? And those weren't even that good of horses that were stacked on. So think if it was a Supreme Polarity and a Breathless Edge that doubled up like that. Holy shenanigans, there'd be like 1,000 to 1 odds.
Interesting. That makes you think, right? Because I think that is interesting that it kind of lets you see the future of what's possible once you breed down the line, or how important it is to kind of keep wrapping that stuff in. So, and Dr. Ian, to your point, those horses that maybe are fast now might not be in the future. That doesn't mean they lose their value, though, correct?
I mean, if the Genesis horses, the value is they're closer to the top of the bloodline. So in theory, you should have more consistent, you should kind of expect what you're going to get off of them, more likely. I think that's part of what that implies to the elites might be the best racers ultimately, but maybe having the exclusives built properly could be the best breeders, right? And how do you get one of those? You need the Genesis and the Legendary. It's all bricks. We always talk about building bricks and putting them all together. You got to have all the pieces to build that up together. That's the way
if you want to make a breeding mare, you need those Genesis horses still, right? Because you have a mare that continuously pumps out champs on elite level, then you can do that every month.
You could sell them. There's your revenue stream, and keep the horses that produced them and just keep making elites to sell. I mean, what would Pinkman be worth? These are already out there. I'm not looking at open sea, but he's probably out there. You know, but if you could make another Pinkman.
And I assume that mutation rate is also influenced by Z number, right? So the lower Z number should give you less mutation also beyond just bloodline mutation, because the population should be larger just by, growth of the numbers to get down there.
Right. So your 10s, you mean, versus.
Yeah. So Z20s, there's going to be a ton of Z20s. There's going to be way more Z20s probably right now than there are Nakamoto Z1s, just off that last weekend.
Oh, for sure.
You think about how much breeding happened.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. Awesome. I think what I love about this conversation is we uncovered so much, but still haven't uncovered anything, right? Like, and that's kind of what the fun of the game is. And so I think we'll have to have you both on in a couple weeks or months and see kind of what we've been able to uncover as breeding opens up for hopefully permanently, and we can start working through some of these theories.
When are we expecting that back, by the way?
They gotta fix the super parent issue.
There's no tease of when that might occur.
No, they gave up on telling us that. I think it'll be before Friday. Right? They probably want to get it done before Friday because that gives them a week to advertise the new drop. Because they at least want a week of advertisement, and they do the drops on Fridays, and they need to be on Polygon Matic to make sure the instantaneous transactions. So breeding is determinant of when the next drop happens too, right?
Okay.
So when breeding, drop happens.
Interesting. That's awesome. I think that's a great place to stop. So follow Zed Gazette, and we will post everybody's handles on the tweets tomorrow and all of the social medias. But we do want to spend the time and thank you, Dr. Ian. I appreciate you making the appearance for us here at the Mint Condition, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. And Adam, thank you very much for coming on. You continue to be a awesome source of information, just somebody to bounce ideas off of, and keep me guessing too. So
thanks for the invite, guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I actually love talking the game. It's a lot of because I just have Adam to talk the game with right now. I don't really, I don't go crazy on the chat. I'm busy with work. So
you're welcome.
But y'all, this has been great, y'all.
You're welcome here to chat the game anytime. So that's gonna do it for us. Until next time, stay mint.